Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we're drifting back slowly, gently, to a land where the river doesn't just flow, it decides your entire life. Imagine this. The air is dry and sharp, but the sun is a weight, not a light. You wake to a world of sand, sweat, and ceremony. You stretch, and the papyrus mat crackles beneath you. Outside, a sacred river stinks faintly of fish and old promises. The Pharaoh claims to be a god, the Nile claims to be kind, and your back claims it's already broken. You're about to become a farmer in ancient Egypt, and let's just say you might not survive this one. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, there's a certain beauty in the way history forgets the sweat. Statues of pharaohs rise in impossible perfection. Polished stone skin, symmetrical crowns, calm expressions that suggest divine paperwork, not digestive issues. But below those pedestals, beyond the glitter of tombs and temples, someone still had to grow the wheat, and that someone is you. You with no sandals, no savings, and no particular say in anything. Welcome to ancient Egypt. Not the glossy brochure version with golden death masks and eyeliner, but the real one. The version where being a farmer isn't quaint or earthy. It's a daily endurance ritual set to the rhythm of a river that floods when it feels like it and recedes with all the grace of a bad mood. You're not sipping date wine by a lotus pond. You're ankle deep in silt, muttering about your neighbor's ox and praying the tax collector gets dysentery. Your diet? Bread hard enough to chip teeth, beer thick enough to count as soup, and onions that don't taste so much like food as they do a dare. And then there's the sun. It doesn't rise. It slams into you. Every single day, your job begins at dawn and ends when your spine begs for a reboot. Your house is made of baked mud. Your religion demands constant approval, and your boss is technically divine. Still, you endure. Because in this world, survival isn't noble. It's necessary. You owe grain to the temple, sweat to the land, and your silence to the throne. Complaining doesn't change anything, except maybe your breathing privileges. Over the next 2 hours, we'll walk through fields and temples, palaces, and floodplains. You'll feel the grain dust in your lungs, the river sludge between your toes, and the quiet fear that maybe, just maybe, the gods are only pretending to listen. So lie back. Get comfortable, if you can. Because your shift starts at dawn, and Ra waits for no one. Ra. Now, before we go any further, a quick word on the sun god, who's slowly roasting you alive. Ra. Not just a name. It's not just the sun. He's the reason you can't sleep in. It's the reason you squint. The reason your tunic smells like cooked onions by midday. Ra is the god of the sun. Creation, kingship, and light, all rolled into one blinding celestial being. He rides a boat, a solar bark if you're fancy, across the sky every day. Think of it like an ancient divine ferry service, only instead of carrying passengers, it drags daylight over everyone, whether they ask for it or not. At night, he sails through the underworld, fighting off snakes and cosmic nightmares, so that morning can happen again. Oh, yes. Every sunrise is technically a victory lap. To question Ra is to question light, heat, and the entire idea of being alive. Which means complaining about sunburn is, spiritually speaking, mild treason.
Out!
So when you feel the day punch you in the face with light, remember, it's not weather, it's worship.
Oh well.
Ra waits for no one. You don't wake up in ancient Egypt, you get summoned. The sun doesn't rise gently here, it erupts. Bursts through the reed slats of your windowless mud brick hut like it is angry you dared to lie down in the first place. You were dreaming, maybe of bread without grit, or a day when your bones didn't mutter, but now your eyelids are sweating. That's how the morning begins, not with birdsong, with eyelid sweat. The bed, if you can still call it that, is a flattened mat stuffed with straw and ancient regrets. Every time you roll over, the reeds remind you that comfort is a myth. They creak like 1,000 tiny joints. Some theirs, most yours. The pillow? A carved wooden headrest designed to elevate your skull to heaven and your neck into cramped purgatory. less of a cushion, more of a practical joke. You sit up slowly because your spine has conditions now. It crackles like firewood. Not because it's cozy, but because it might actually ignite from friction. You stretch, and your knees argue with your ambitions. They sound like dry papyrus being folded in half badly. Your ankles protest too. You remind them they're attached to you. They refuse to answer. It's not even sunrise, and you already feel like a sun-dried fish. You'd hoped the Nile breeze might visit you during the night, like the old stories promised. But no. The air is thick and unmoved, like someone tried to invent humidity with papyrus and failure. You peel off your linen tunic, which clings like it's emotionally attached, and you find grains of sand in places you thought were sacred. There's no morning bath. Not yet. First comes the shuffle, the careful crack-toe shuffle across the dirt floor. It's packed hard from years of being ignored and trampled. Every step is a conversation with the earth, and the earth doesn't like you. You step outside into the pre-dawn heat. The sun hasn't even shown its full face, but it's already making threats. The air smells like dust, goat, and whatever your neighbor was fermenting yesterday. You hope it was barley. You fear it was revenge. The day hasn't begun, but the work already has. You hear the coughs of other farmers waking, the ritual chorus of people who stopped believing in rest 3 dynasties ago. Someone sneezes. Someone else curses. Someone's child is crying because sleep, like fresh dates, is rationed. You splash a handful of Nile water onto your face, which is more of a gamble than a refreshment. The river is sacred, yes. It's also full of frogs, fish guts, and the moral ambiguity of 1,000 ancestors. The water is warm. Of course it is. Everything here is warm. The clay, the wind, even your complaints. You rub the grit from your eyes. Not all of it comes out. Some of it you suspect is permanent now. You sigh deeply, not because it helps, because sighing is all that's left of luxury. Then you reach for the tool you've had since you could walk, a wooden hoe with splinters older than your eldest child, and you begin the walk to the fields. Your back already hurts. Your day hasn't even started. In the sun. Still isn't all the way up? You thought maybe the morning walk would loosen your joints? Maybe the act of moving would summon energy from somewhere deep inside you? From your ancestors, your training, your breakfast? Unfortunately, you have none of those. There's no breakfast. Just a half mug of thick, sour beer that doubles as hydration, nutrition, and a personality test. It tastes like someone tried to pickle bread in river water, which, to be fair, is exactly what happened. The sun now sits low but potent, like a judgmental elder slowly rising from a throne. The fields stretch out ahead, a patchwork of cracked earth. Soggy deltas and ambitious weeds who believe in themselves more than you do. Your feet disappear into the mud almost immediately, swallowed by a substance that smells like decomposed history and goat memories. You tug them free with a sound that can only be described as agricultural embarrassment. Then you take another step, and it starts again. This is the field. This is your kingdom. It's not golden, not promised. Just deeply brown. You're not alone. Other farmers are already hunched over, their spines permanently bent in the shape of service. No one talks. Words are expensive, and water is limited. You communicate in nods, grunts, and the universal language of I to have lost feeling in my lower back. The work. It's planting season, which means dragging a heavy wooden plow behind an ox, who's also given up. The ox has a name, probably. You've stopped using it. You just call him yes, fine, and he answers with silence and occasional flatulence. The rope around your shoulders pulls against your collarbone, your arms burn, your hands blister, and the furrows you make, crooked, shallow, uneven, feel like they've been judged by the gods, the temple priests, and possibly a passing ibis. You stop to wipe your brow. The sweat stings your eyes. You forgot again that your hands are coated in fertilizer. Natural, of course. Rich in nutrients. And very, very committed to existing under your fingernails forever. Then comes the scribe. You didn't hear him approach, which is impressive considering he wears sandals louder than a temple gong. He's here to check your grain quota. Not the grain you have now, but the grain you will have, assuming everything goes well. Spoiler, it won't. He carries a reed pen, a tablet, and the unmistakable smell of someone who doesn't work outdoors. He doesn't greet you. He doesn't need to. He just stares at your field, makes a mark, and leaves. Like a bird who poops on your shoulder and flies away with dignity. You don't argue. Can't. You're required to give a portion of your harvest to the state, the temple, and your landlord. The remaining portion is for you. To eat, to trade, to store, to live. Assuming there is a remaining portion, you go back to work, because the mud doesn't care about your feelings. The sun doesn't care about your schedule. And the quota certainly doesn't care that your ox just wandered off again. You call after it. It doesn't stop. It never does. You don't know what time it is. The sun doesn't tell time. It just stares. Harsh, quiet, and unblinking. Like a tax official made of fire. Your shadow is short now, hiding under your feet like it's embarrassed to be seen with you. That means it's midday, or close enough to it, which means lunch. Maybe you find a crooked patch of shade. Under a sycamore tree that's older than your entire bloodline and just as resentful. The ground is dry, cracked, and full of ants who greet you with mandibular enthusiasm. You sit anyway, because anything is better than standing. The ox is already lying down. Of course it is. It's the only one who truly understands pacing. You open your lunch bundle. It's wrapped in cloth that used to be white back when optimism was still fashionable. Inside the meal, a piece of coarse barley bread, a wedge of dried onion, and a few sad olives who look like they gave up last week. You take a bite, the bread is dry. Not crunchy, not toasted. Just existentially dry, like it's forgotten what moisture feels like. It sticks to your teeth with the tenacity of wet clay and the flavor of disappointment. You chew and chew. It's less a meal, more a conversation with a reluctant food item. You try the onion next. It's pungent enough to count as revenge. It burns in your nose, your mouth, and somewhere deep in your soul. The olives, mostly pit, suck on them for entertainment, like the world's worst candy. But you're not alone. Other farmers are eating too. No one talks, but you can tell who got lucky and who's just pretending. Someone has a fig, a single lonely fig. It looks soft, ripe. You don't look directly at it. It feels rude, like staring at royalty. You think about asking to trade, your bread for a bite, your sandals, your eternal loyalty. But no, fig ownership is sacred. Wars have been started over less. You settle for your barley. You finish eating and immediately feel hungrier. Somehow it's a magic trick. A full stomach that still feels like an echo. The wind picks up, carrying dust and rumors. It smells like scorched grass, faint sweat, and the Nile pretending to be generous. You drink some beer from a clay jug. It's warm. Of course it is. It's always warm. The flavor hasn't improved. It still tastes like someone dared a grain to become soup and then gave up halfway through. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and notice a blister. A new one. Congratulations. You close your cloth, gather the crumbs, and stand. Slowly, like you're negotiating a truce with your knees. They don't sign it. They just grunt. Lunch is over. Not because you're done, but because time doesn't care. The sun still watches. The ox is still chewing. In the field, the glorious, indifferent field, still waits. You sigh. The ants have already started reclaiming your seat. There's a joke among farmers, a quiet one, told with smirks and sunburnt shoulders. It goes, the Nile always provides, mostly problems. Because in Egypt, the river isn't just water, it's fate. The Nile floods each year like clockwork, and if it doesn't, your children eat sand. If it floods too much, your house floats away with the neighbor's goats. And if it floods just the right amount, which it rarely does, congratulations, you still owe the temple half your harvest. The season of Akhet, the flood season, sounds majestic. It's not. It means mud. Endless, sticky, ambitious mud that oozes into your home, your fields, your sandals, and sometimes your dreams. You spend days wading through it, trying to coax the land into not being a swamp. Your legs ache, your tools snap, your ox, for reasons known only to itself, refuses to move through anything deeper than its ankles. But the water is sacred, so you don't curse it. It's not loudly. You just mutter to the reeds. Then comes Pare, the season of growth, supposedly. If the flood was too low, you're planting in dust. If it was too high, you're still draining puddles the size of small cities. Either way, you're guessing. There are no forecasts, just priests reading the stars, the river, and occasionally the behavior of cats. You nod politely when they speak. even if they're clearly making it up. Arguing with a priest is like insulting the Nile itself, only wetter. Next is Shemu, the season of harvest. It sounds rewarding. It's not. It's panic. Everything has to be collected, counted, taxed, and stored before the sun turns everything into crisped regret. The grain is dry, the wind is dry, your throat is dry. Your patience is brittle enough to shatter when someone sneezes too loud. You harvest from dawn to dusk, hunched over, moving like a broken beetle with a quota. Every stalk of wheat feels like a personal insult. Every bundle is weighed, inspected, and tithed. You keep what's left. Often it's not enough. Often you lie about how much there was in the first place. You bury a sack near the house. You dig it up later and discover the rats found it first. They always do. There's no year without disaster, just different flavors of failure. One year, the river doesn't rise. You pray. The next year, it rises too far. You pray harder. The year after that, it rises perfectly. And a plague of locusts arrives with excellent timing, but you don't complain. You adjust. You adapt. You grow calluses where hope used to be. You tell your children that this is the way, that the gods are watching, that next year will be better. You say it often enough, you almost believe it, and then the Nile rises again. Let's say somehow miraculously you survive the flood. The sun doesn't burn you into dust. The locusts forget your village. The ox doesn't wander into a crocodile's mouth. And your harvest, manageable, maybe even decent. You dare, foolishly, to feel hope. That's your first mistake, because now comes the temple official. He arrives with two things: a reed pen sharp enough to draw blood, and an expression that suggests he hasn't enjoyed anything since Dynasty 11. He is dressed in clean linen, suspiciously clean linen, and wears enough coal under his eyes to make even the gods nervous. He asks no questions. He simply knows. He knows what your field should have produced. He knows what the gods are owed. And he knows, deep in his smooth scribe soul, that you're probably lying. You hand over your recorded yield. On papyrus, if you're rich, or scratched into a potsherd if you're not. He nods. He does not smile. Smiling implies you might be equals. You are not. He works for the temple. You work for mud. Then the audit begins. He weighs the sacks, not by feeling, but by ritualistic scowl. One by one, your bundles disappear into the temple cart. You're told this is your offering to the gods, to ensure the Nile floods again, to keep the sun rising, to prevent the sky from falling, which sounds important. But mostly it feels like you're paying for Ra's catering bill. You give and give. By the end, what's left is your share. Which is to say, what remains after everyone else stopped being hungry. And don't forget the other tax. The state. Because while the gods might be appeased by incense and solemn chanting, bureaucracy likes grain. The local governor sends his own collector, a man who smells like papyrus, goat oil, and quiet corruption. Does not trust the temple. He double-checks everything. Two men argue. Over numbers? Over bundles? Over who gets what from whom and how much you're definitely hiding. You stand there like a statue no one would bother restoring, your arms full of wheat, your ears full of threats, your mouth shut. Eventually they agree. By agree, they mean you pay twice. You think about protesting. Briefly, then you remember the farmer from the next village who did. He's still working, but now for free. His house is smaller, his smile non-existent. So you nod. You nod as they take your grain. You nod as they write things down. You nod until your neck feels like it belongs to someone else. And when they leave, one to the temple, the other to the governor's granary, you sit down beside your empty sacks and try to remember the word for fair. It doesn't exist in your language. Not really. It's just something whispered. Sometimes in dreams that smell like fresh bread and actual choice. You sigh. Then you go inside to divide what's left. Not for dinner. Not yet. First, you need to decide. Do you plant or do you eat? You return home after a long day of feeding everyone but yourself. You're tired, blistered, and covered in enough dried mud to qualify as a newly discovered statue. All you want is rest, peace, maybe even a breeze. You get none of these, your house is made of mud brick, which sounds durable and is, until you remember that mud is just dirt with trust issues. During the dry season, your walls crack like old knees. During the flood season, They sag like a camel after a disappointing meal. You patch them constantly, with more mud, which feels like asking a tired friend to comfort another tired friend. The door is a reed curtain. It doesn't close. It doesn't lock. It doesn't stop goats, neighbors, or gossip. Privacy is theoretical. Sound carries through the walls like regret through family stories. You try to change your tunic in the corner, only to realize someone's grandmother is peering through the entrance asking if you have any spare lentils. You do not. Inside, it's dim, warm, and shaped like a bread oven with opinions. The floor is dirt. The furniture is also dirt, just shaped into things and covered with worn mats. Your bed is a raised platform stuffed with straw that pokes you lovingly all night long. Every time you lie down, a new stalk finds a new nerve. You scan the room. Okay, clay pot is cracked again. The roof made of palm fronds and ambition creaks under the weight of a bird. Just one bird, small one. It sounds like the whole thing's about to retire permanently. Your children, if you have them, are wrestling in the corner. Over a beetle. It's a special beetle. Apparently, you don't ask. Your partner is near the fire pit, coaxing it into life with damp twigs and muttered prayers. The smoke fills the hut in a way that's both spiritual and respiratory. You cough. The children cough. The bird coughs. Maybe. Dinner is coming, eventually. Possibly. In the meantime, you scrape your feet. Sandals come off with a sigh, as if even they're exhausted. You inspect your toes. They've reached a state beyond dirty. They're archaeological. You sit. Or rather, you lean carefully into a sitting position that doesn't provoke your spine too much. You close your eyes. Something drips on your head. You don't look up. If it's water, that's a gift. If it's not, that's a problem for future you. You try to rest. But the roof is whispering. The walls are weeping. And outside, someone's goat is yelling again, possibly about politics. You're not sure, and yet this is home. Not because it's perfect, but because it's where your tools are, where your pots crack, where your children name insects, where your knees sigh, and your back forgets what straight feels like. It's flawed. It's fragile. It's falling apart slightly more each year. But so are you. Evening settles slowly, like a lazy falcon deciding whether it's worth landing. The air cools slightly. Not enough to matter, just enough to remind you that the heat could get worse tomorrow. You're sitting with your family now, or near them, or in the same general vicinity, because your house is one room and everyone breathes louder than you'd like. Marriage in your world isn't about romance. It's about function, stability, producing children, surviving plagues with someone who also dislikes your neighbor. Love is possible, but optional. Like lentils in your stew, your spouse sits across from you. They've had the same day as you, but with more fire and fewer oxen. They are also blistered, hungry, and operating on whatever sleep could be salvaged between roof leaks and mosquito campaigns. Want to say something kind? But kindness takes effort, okay? And effort, frankly, has already been spent. So instead, you grunt. They grunt back, in married farmer language. That's a heartfelt sonnet. Your children are barefoot, dusty, and possibly wrestling again. This time over a piece of date pit they recalling the treasure. You don't intervene. Right. Partly because it's not worth it, and partly because you remember doing the same with a bit of broken pottery when you were their age. History repeats, especially when there's nothing else to do. You try to talk, but every topic is dangerous. Say the wrong thing. Why is there no fish? And you've started a debate about fishing, market prices, and your cousin who once stole a net. Mention your aching back, and you'll be reminded of someone else's worse injury. Say nothing, and it's somehow suspicious. So you aim for safe terrain. Long day, huh? They nod. You nod. You chew air in unison. Marriage in ancient Egypt is a long mutual agreement not to ruin dinner. You share food, burdens, and occasionally silence so deep it has weight. You do not complain about the things that cannot be changed. The temple taxes, the heat, the beetles in the flour jar. You acknowledge them with a glance, then move on. There are moments of warmth, quiet ones. When your spouse hands you the less burnt half of the bread, when the fire glows just enough to light their face in soft gold, when the baby finally sleeps and everyone forgets, for one short hour, how loud life usually is. But mostly it's routine, repetitive, like a song you don't love but can't stop humming. You work, You eat. You nod. You sleep. Repeat. You lie down for the night. If lying down is the right word for folding yourself into a straw mat while dodging children in existential dread, your partner is already curled up beside you. Not close, but present. Like a familiar ache that doesn't hurt anymore. And in the dark, just before sleep, you whisper something you don't expect them to hear. Let's hope the ox doesn't escape again. They whisper back. It already did. Once in a while, the calendar delivers something that isn't a disaster. A festival, not because the gods are generous, but because even they seem to understand that if the farmers break, the pyramids won't get built. So you get a day, maybe two, marked by drums, beer, and the faint suggestion that joy is possible if you squint hard enough. You wake up tired, of course. You're always tired. But there is music in the air. Someone is banging on a drum made from a hollowed gourd and leftover ambition. People are laughing, or at least producing laugh-like noises. You decide to participate. You bathe, not thoroughly, just enough to smell slightly less like damp agriculture. You rub oil on your arms. You wear your nicest tunic, which is only moderately patched and has fewer stains than usual. It's not fashion, it's optimism in cloth form. At the village square, there are stalls. Well, tables. Actually, flat rocks with things on them. Dried fish, flatbread, and something someone insists is a date cake, but looks suspiciously like compressed mud with seeds. You don't ask questions. You trade a few beads, maybe a scrap of copper, and get a sticky handful of whatever it is. It's sweet, sort of. You chew carefully and hope it wasn't meant for livestock. And then there's beer. Festival beer isn't like daily beer. It's thicker, cloudier, brewed with the recklessness of celebration. It's warm, of course. Beer here is always warm. But it goes down smooth, like the end of a work song. By your second cup, your knees feel less accusatory. By the third, you're explaining grain prices to someone's goat. There's dancing, not graceful, but enthusiastic. You sway, you stomp, you step on someone's foot, they step on yours. It's fine. No one's keeping score except maybe the gods, and they seem drunk too. The priests parade through in ceremonial wigs and painted faces. They carry statues, chant prayers, and look mildly annoyed to be outdoors. People bow. You do too. Not out of piety, but because it's the only socially acceptable way to rest your spine for 10 seconds. Later, there's a storyteller. He stands on a crate and recounts tales of gods, pharaohs, and magical birds that sing fortunes. The children believe every word. You believe none of it. But it's a nice sound, and it masks the rumbling in your stomach. Someone sets off a small firework. It's more of a spark than a spectacle, but the crowd gasps. It's the most excitement anyone's had since the last crocodile incident. You clap, sincerely. You smile. Briefly. It feels strange. And just like that, it's over. The drums fade. The beer runs out. The crowd thins. You walk home under a sky so clear it feels like a trick. You lie back down on your familiar, uncomfortable mat, tasting stale sweetness on your breath and dust on your tongue. The festival is over, but your blisters are still here. Your debt is still here. And your ox, as always, is missing. You wake up coughing. Not the casual kind, the kind that echoes inside your ribcage like it is trying to knock on something important. You sit up slowly, like your body's asking permission from itself. Your throat burns. Your head feels full of bees. Not spiritual bees. It's just the normal, angry kind. You're sick. And now comes the fun part. Getting better. Ancient Egyptian style. There's no doctor. Not in the way you might imagine. There's no appointments, no stethoscope, no cheerful waiting room with papyrus magazines. Instead, there's a healer who lives near the edge of the village and smells like crushed onions and regret. You don't question her methods. She's old. She's seen things. She once brought a neighbor's son back from a 3-day coma using honey, prayers, and a frog. You stumble over to her hut. She eyes you, mutters something about your aura being full of fish, and tells you to sit. You do. Not because you believe in fish auras, but because standing feels optional right now. She places a hand on your forehead, frowns, then rummages through jars. One holds crushed herbs. Another holds something that might be lizard bones. A third contains an unidentified sludge that smells like history and feet. She mixes a little of everything with water and hands you the result. It tastes like punishment. She ties a string around your wrist. An amulet, she says, for protection. It's a piece of copper shaped like an eye, or a beetle, or possibly both. You thank her with whatever energy remains, give her a few beans in payment, and stumble back home, slightly less alive than when you left. Back in your hut, your family avoids you, not out of fear. Everyone's already shared your germs. But because no one wants to catch your chores, you lie down. The mat is less comfortable when you're feverish. The straw now feels like a bad joke with sharp corners. You sweat, then shiver, then sweat again. It's like your body is trying out different climates. Someone brings you broth. It's warm, thin, and smells faintly of boiled decisions. You sip it, you cough, you sigh, sleep badly. When you wake, you feel not better, but not worse, which in ancient Egypt counts as progress. Illness here isn't rare. It's a seasonal visitor like the flood or your uncle who always borrows tools. You've had fevers before, so has everyone. You know the rules. Stay quiet, eat if you can, drink if the river hasn't turned against you again. The priests say sickness is caused by demons, bad dreams, or angry gods. The healer says it's wind in the belly. You say nothing. You just breathe slowly, hoping your lungs remember how to cooperate. Days pass. The cough softens. Your legs remember how to support your regrets. You step outside into the sun, blinking, fragile, but upright. You survived, somehow. The amulet didn't help. The potion probably made it worse. The only real medicine is time, rest, and a deep spiritual commitment to not dying just yet. Eventually it happens. It's not to you, not yet, but to someone close. A neighbor, a cousin. The old woman who used to sell onions so pungent they could cure dishonesty. One day she's there, grumbling about prices. The next, she's not. Gone, quietly, like the Nile, retreating without warning. Death in your world isn't rare. It's not even surprising. It's routine, like harvesting or arguing with goats. But it still leaves a dent, like a missing brick in a wall you always assumed would stand forever. Word spreads. Not quickly. There's no town crier, just gossip on legs. You hear it while fetching water, whispered by someone holding a basket of lentils like it's sacred truth. She's gone, they say, you nod. What else can you do? Preparations begin. Death is a process here, not a moment. There's washing, wrapping, wailing.
Ow.
The body is cleaned with oils that smell like temples and faraway spices. It's wrapped in linen, carefully, reverently, with more attention than the person ever received while alive. If the family has money, which is unlikely, they'll hire a priest to say the proper words. If they don't, the neighbors will mumble something close enough. The idea is to guide the soul to the afterlife, or at least to nudge it gently in the right direction. You contribute, of course. Everyone does. A handful of grain, a strip of cloth, a borrowed song. The dead can't pay their own way, and in Egypt, even death comes with fees. The burial isn't grand. There's no golden coffin, no pyramids, no long procession of mourners dressed like birds. Just a simple grave near the village edge, a shallow place in the sand, marked by a pile of stones and a silence that hums slightly louder than before. You don't attend the whole ceremony. Most don't. There's work to do. The fields don't pause for grief. You offer a final bow, a muttered word, and go back to planting onions. The same kind she once sold. The cycle continues. Later that night, you sit by the fire, watching the flames dance like nervous spirits. You think about the dead woman, about how she once laughed so hard she snorted beer through her nose, about how she claimed she knew a spell to keep rats out of flour, about how no one ever asked her to prove it. You wonder what she sees now. If she made it to the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of heaven, where the crops are always ripe and your back never hurts, you hope she's there. You hope someone remembers your name when it's your turn. You lie back on your mat, stare at the dark, and realize that the ceremony you'll get one day won't be for you. It'll be for others. You won't see the fire, the cloth, or the cheap amulet someone ties around your ankle in hopeful confusion. You'll just be gone. And the next day, the ox will still need feeding. You're not supposed to question the gods, but Akhenaten did, loudly with statues and poetry. And a sun disk, he insisted, was the only thing worth worshipping. But before he rewrote Egypt's theology, before he offended generations of priests and ensured his name would be chiseled out of history with alarming enthusiasm, he was just a boy. A royal boy, which is to say, born with comfort and expectations, but very little actual say in anything. You don't get to choose your face. Akhenaten didn't either, and it was unusual. Portraits show a long skull, narrow eyes, wide hips, and a pout that suggests he just found out someone stole his papyrus lunch wrap. Whether that's accurate or the result of overzealous sculptors trying to make him look divine is unclear. Either way, he doesn't resemble other pharaohs. He resembles a theological fever dream. His name at birth wasn't Akhenaten. It was Amenhotep IV, a name heavy with God-pleasing intent. He was raised in the palace of Thebes, surrounded by gold, incense, and people paid to agree with him. But even early on, there were murmurs. He didn't enjoy hunting. He didn't like formal court rituals. He preferred long walks, sunlit gardens, and conversations with things that didn't always answer back, like walls or deities. You, if you were his palace servant, might have found him odd. Not unkind, just distant. He didn't strike people as a leader. He struck them as someone writing poetry to a window. In a world where pharaohs were expected to be lions in human form, he was more like a thoughtful cat sunbathing in the hallway. As he grew, the priests of Ammon kept a close eye. Ammon was the god at the time, powerful, mysterious, deeply networked, with more temples than most nobles had teeth. The priesthood was rich, influential, and not particularly fond of royal teenagers who asked, "But what if we did religion differently?" But Amenhotep IV was still royal. So he did what royals do. Inherited power, inherited expectations, inherited an empire that wasn't ready for him. And when his father died, the court braced itself. A new pharaoh, young, sensitive, possibly allergic to formality. Coronation was traditional. Sacred oils, gold-adorned processions, hymns to Ammon echoing through temple halls. Everyone smiled. Everyone bowed. Everyone assumed the new pharaoh would stay within the lines. He did not. Even in those early years, he began to drift toward the sun, not metaphorically, literally. He started speaking more of Aten, the visible sun disk, not Amen, the hidden god. Aten was radiant, singular, honest. You could see it, feel it, worship it, without needing an entire class of intermediaries with fancy hats. You, as a scribe, might have written down these early speeches with a slight twitch in your pen hand, not because they were treasonous yet, but because they were weird. It's a kind of weird that upsets accountants and spiritual bureaucrats. Still, people tolerated him. He hadn't done anything drastic yet, but you could feel it, like a breeze from the wrong direction. Something was coming, and it would not wear the usual crown. You don't choose your spouse, not here, not now, especially not when you're pharaoh. Marriage is politics wrapped in perfume, a treaty with cheekbones. But Amenhotep IV, soon to be Akhenaten, ends up with Nefertiti, and that changes everything. She is beautiful. Unreasonably so. Not just by your dusty village standards, but by any standard. Her face will survive millennia, carved in stone, painted on tomb walls, uncovered by startled archaeologists, and turned into postcards. But in her own time, she's more than a face. She's a force. You, a palace servant with a talent for keeping your eyes on the floor, would have noticed it anyway. The way room's quiet when she enters, the way scribes stand straighter, the way the high priest of Ammon, who outranks everyone except the gods, forgets his lines in her presence. She walks like someone who owns the ground. Together, they are ... peculiar, devoted, oddly equal, inseparable in public and private. Nefertiti isn't just the queen, she's the queen. She's present in official ceremonies, joins Akhenaten in worship, and sometimes appears in art-performing rituals typically reserved for pharaohs, not just participating, leading. People whisper. You hear it while sweeping the courtyard. She's more than a consort. She guides him. She's the real power. They might be right. The two of them begin to shift Egypt's spiritual center. Less Amen, more Aten, less shadows, more light. Worship becomes a performance of intimacy. Pharaoh and Queen raising offerings to the visible sun, their faces tilted upward like sunflowers with political ambitions. You're ordered to prepare a new kind of temple, one without inner sanctums, without dark corridors, open air, bathed in light. You blink a lot. You squint. You trip over unfinished sandstone. This isn't how things are done. But Nefertiti's always there, directing, arranging, adjusting the lotus-shaped columns as if remodeling religion like it's a dining room. She smiles rarely, but when she does, it's the kind of smile that feels both benevolent and a little bit final. People start using her name in prayers, quietly, cautiously. You try not to react when you hear it, but it lands oddly in your ears. A queen being spoken of like a god. Not metaphorically, actually. And still Akhenaten beams. He beams at her. He beams at the sun. He beams like someone who has finally built a life out of his own ideas, unbothered by tradition, reason, or temple budgets. At feasts, they sit side by side. He pours her wine. She adjusts his necklace, carry platters of roasted goose past them, trying not to trip over their long shadows, which fall together like matching hieroglyphs. You'd know what kind of love this is. Whether it's passion or strategy or something stranger, but you know this. Nefertiti isn't standing behind him. She's standing beside him, sometimes even slightly in front. And the sun, as always, watches. You've barely adjusted to the new temple. You finally figured out how to face Aten without accidentally blinding yourself. You learned the new hymns, the new prayer hand positions, even the correct way to nod at a disk of light. And just when you think things might settle, the pharaoh decides to move the capital. Not just move it, build a new one from scratch, in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. You are a worker now, reassigned. That's the word they use, reassigned. As if you've been gently placed in a new opportunity, rather than dragged across sand to Hammerstone for a divine whim. The location, Akhenaten, horizon of the Atan. It has no water supply, no walls, no history, just wide open space, and an enthusiastic sun that punches you in the face every morning like a flaming bureaucrat. Pharaoh picked it himself. Claimed the spot was chosen by Aten. More likely it was chosen because it had no shrines to Amen. No memories. A blank slate for a god with no patience for shadows. The construction begins immediately. You carry bricks, chip at limestone, sweat until you feel hollowed out by light. The city rises fast, not because of miracles, but because no one dares suggest slowing down. Buildings are thrown up in record time. Walls that look like they were scared into place. Temples that feel more like sun traps than sanctuaries. The streets are wide, straight, and completely devoid of shade or mercy. Everything is open air, bright, and geometrically enthusiastic. You begin to dream in rectangles. There's no privacy, no old trees, no quiet, only the constant hum of hammers. Sandals scraping stone, and people trying not to say what they're thinking. Why are we here? Then comes the art. Everywhere you look, walls are covered in images of the royal family, but not the usual stiff, idealized poses. These ones laugh, hug, kiss their children. Akhenaten holds Nefertiti's hand like he's trying to win a bet on affection. Shown beneath Aten, whose sun rays end in little fingers, reaching down to touch only them. Always them. You're told this. It's revolutionary, intimate, sacred. It's also slightly unnerving. You start noticing that no other gods appear. No Amen. No Osiris. No Thoth. Just Aten. Always Aten. A disk with hands. Floating. Quietly, quietly. Scribes adjust. Builders keep building. Keep carrying bricks under the heat of the most involved deity you've ever experienced. Eventually, Akhenaten becomes real. People live here now. Markets form. Homes appear. The royal palace rises at the center like an exalted sunburn. And the temple to Aten gleams. White stone open roof, filled with incense that smells like conviction and mild desperation. Still, it doesn't feel like home. Not yet. Maybe never. It feels like something borrowed. Temporary. A city balanced on one man's vision and one god's spotlight. The wind here doesn't whisper, it lectures. You finish laying bricks for the day, your hands shake, your skin peels. You stare at the horizon, the one pharaoh named after the sun, and for the first time, you wonder what happens if the sun changes. Its mind? Asterisk, asterisk, you've lived your whole life, surrounded by gods. Plural. Gods for every purpose, for birth, for crops, for dreams, for digestion. You knew their names before you knew your own. You've seen them carved into every wall, painted across every ceiling, whispered in every hallway.
They were
Everywhere, like sand or bureaucracy, with better fashion sense. And now they're gone. Well, not gone, just unmentioned. Quietly erased, like a guest who overstayed their welcome and was politely smudged out of the group portrait. Akhenaten isn't content to promote Aten. He abolishes the rest. Temples are shuttered, statues removed. Priests of Ammon, once the loudest voices in the empire, are dismissed, like overpaid singers at the wrong festival. Their rituals, their processions, their complicated hats, gone. You, now a scribe tasked with editing temple records, are told to remove names. Gods vanish one by one under your reed pen. Not just ignored, but scratched out like mistakes in a cosmic recipe. Whole walls are scraped clean, stories uncarved, hymns rewritten to feature a sun disk with arms and very few moral complexities. At first it feels exciting, new. You're part of a revolution. Then it starts to feel empty. You walk past old temples, quiet now, echoing with dust and pigeons. Offerings rot untouched. Cats sleep where prayers used to happen. People still whisper the old names, but only at night and only to their bread dough or their sick children. The gods aren't gone from memory, it's just from official policy. You're told this is progress, that Egypt is finally free of confusion. One God, one truth, one sun-shaped answer. But one God doesn't answer every question. You get sick. You kneel before the Aten and feel nothing. No flicker, no warmth, just a sunbeam that lands the same on you, a dying farmer and a nearby rock. You begin to miss the old gods, the weird ones. It's the ones with jackal heads and ibis beaks and too many feathers. At least they listened, or at least they pretended to. The royal couple still beams in their open temples, radiant and serene. As if nothing smells weird and no one's dying of mouth infections, they insist this is the future. You begin to suspect it's just their future. The priests are gone. The gods are gone. But the taxes remain, the hunger remains, the backaches, the blisters, the blinding light, all still here. But now, without a spiritual suggestion box to complain into, you go to your old shrine. The one tucked behind your house, under a rock ledge, where you once left offerings of garlic and hope. You clean it. You murmur old words. You light a lamp. You feel slightly better, not healed. Just seeing it's not rebellion, not really just memory. Just need to finish your chores, exhausted. You walk past the Temple of Aten, open white, empty of statues, filled with heat, and think, for a god with arms, he doesn't seem to hold much. Asterisk, asterisk, one day, Akhenaten is everywhere, carved, painted, praised. Sung about by choirs who've memorized the syllables of his name like a particularly enthusiastic math problem. And then, it's not. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens like mold in the corner of your ceiling. Quiet, creeping, denied by everyone until it suddenly becomes the only thing you see first. You notice he hasn't appeared in public in a while. You, a pot-bearer at the palace gate, start hearing phrases like he's meditating or the sun demands solitude. Eventually it turns into, he's unwell. Then he's in retreat. And then, just silence. His statues stop being repaired. His new hymns aren't copied as often. The priests, those who remain, shift uneasily, whispering about celestial transitions and imperceptible illuminations. No one knows what that means. No one wants to ask. You ask once, quietly, and your friend, a royal gardener, gives you a look usually reserved for people who ask if they can borrow the Nile. We don't say that name, he says, even though it's still carved on every wall. Except, it's not. Not anymore. Workers begin to chisel. Not new images, but removing them, carefully, awkwardly. Like a child caught scribbling on a wall, trying to reverse time with a wet cloth. The royal family, also vague. Nefertiti is seen less. The daughters, 6 of them, once paraded like divine proof of fertility, disappear one by one from public record. There are rumors, illness, betrayal, divine transformation. Maybe just too much sun, you think. Surely someone knows where Akhenaten is. Someone must have seen him, but no one will say. Not after enough silence, even memory starts to fade, like pigment in harsh daylight. Then the real cleanup begins. New names appear, names that sound familiar but safer. A young boy Tutankhaten, then quickly changed to Tutankhamen, which conveniently brings Amen back into fashion. The old gods creep back like cats who knew they'd be forgiven eventually. The city of Akhenaten, still there, still hot, still geometrically committed to the sun, but now mostly empty. You walk through wide boulevards where paint is peeling. From devotion, where the sun still shines but no one bows anymore, the temples fall quiet, not from reverence, from disuse. You pass a wall where Akhenaten once smiled next to Nefertiti, their faces tilted toward Aten's generous fingers. Someone has chiseled out the sun disk. Aten has been uninvited. Eventually, people stop talking about Akhenaten altogether. Not with anger, with official indifference, as if he was a temporary confusion, a season of bad weather, a long sunstroke that the empire would now prefer to forget. You wonder what happened to him, if he died in that palace, if he wandered off into the desert, if he became a priest of his own forgotten god, or if he just sat one morning beneath his sun, realized no one was listening anymore, and chose to vanish rather than shout, and the empire, relieved, exhausted, sunburned, simply moved on. You don't envy him. Tutankhamun, or Tut, as the scrolls would call him later, affectionately and a little too casually becomes pharaoh, while barely taller than a ceremonial fan. He inherits a throne, an empire, and a divine mess the size of a sandstone cliff. The sun disk is still warm, but no one wants to touch it anymore. Not after Akhenaten. And now it's the boy's job to clean it all up. You're a palace. Scribe again. Rehired. Reassigned. The empire's in recovery, and so are you. Your first job? Learn how to spell Amen again, without flinching. Tuts. Early proclamations are simple. Bring back the gods. Bring back the temples. Bring back the festivals with slightly less theological anxiety. People cheer, mostly because they can cheer about Amen again without someone throwing a sunbeam at them. The boy isn't a reformer. He's a reboot. He restores the old shrines, sends statues of the old gods back into the public eye like releasing forgotten pets who were inexplicably banned. He changes his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamen, as if personally apologizing to the god he wasn't allowed to worship for. The last few years, you help oversee new inscriptions. The orders are clear. Chisel out the weird bits. Remove. Akhenaten erase the Aten stuff. Pretend the sun god never had hands. Pretend everything was fine all along. History, in Egypt, is flexible. A suggestion. A reed scroll easily rewritten. But Tutankhamen, young as he is, isn't healthy. See. Him limp through the palace halls. He leans on canes, wears a crown too big for his skull, smiles like a boy trying very hard not to disappoint 1,000 ghosts. He doesn't speak much. Most decisions are made by his advisors Horemheb, eye men with voices like sandpaper, and patience like crocodiles. Still, people like Tut. Or at least, they like what he represents. Normalcy. A return to what they remember. Not because it was better, just because it didn't require squinting at the sun and pretending it was a personal friend. You sometimes glimpse the old city of Akhenaten in your thoughts. Empty, sun-bleached. Full of unspoken architectural regret, Tut never goes there. Hey, he doesn't need to. It's already crumbling under the weight of everyone's denial. Tut tries to hold it all together. Oh. The gods, the country, his spine. But he's just a boy. And soon he's gone to no grand legacy, no dramatic death, just a quiet tomb in a forgotten corner of the Valley of the Kings, small, rushed, overlooked for centuries. Ironically, he's the only one people will remember. You, sitting with your ink-stained fingers and sunburned shoulders, wonder about that. Akhenaten had cities, poetry, revolution. Nefertiti had elegance and presence, and maybe a hand on the wheel. But Tut gets the fame, all because he died early, left his furniture behind, and didn't get erased in time. You close the scroll. You sigh. The sun is setting now, and for the first time in years, no one tells it what to do. Asterisk, asterisk, you're not sure when she disappeared. One day, Nefertiti is everywhere, ruling beside Akhenaten, leading ceremonies, wearing that tall blue crown. That makes her look like a particularly stylish tower. The next day, she's not in the records anymore. No announcement, no funeral, no dramatic inscription, just absence. An erasure so quiet it feels like a polite cough behind history's curtain. You, an archivist with a mild interest in staying employed, are told not to ask. The queen is resting, they say, or in retreat, or ascending, which sounds suspiciously like dying with spiritual flair. The official explanation changes depending on who you ask, how much wine they've had, and so begins the guessing. Some say she died early, of illness, of sorrow, of political convenience. Some say she changed her name, took on a new identity, became Smenkhare, a briefly ruling figure who may have been Pharaoh, or may have been just a question in eyeliner. Others whisper that she ruled in secret, that she slipped behind the mask of the state and pulled strings from the shadows, like a ghost wearing a very sharp wig. You remember how she moved with certainty, like the floor was honored to support her. It's hard to believe she simply faded away. People like Nefertiti don't disappear, they transform. And then there's the art. For a while, she still appears beside Akhenaten, smiling in sunlight, cradling daughters, raising offerings. But slowly her image becomes less. Fewer scenes, fewer titles. Eventually none. You paint over one yourself. It's not personal, it's just orders. Still, you hesitate before the first brushstroke. She looked real in those paintings. More real than the Aten, more real than most pharaohs. Like someone who understood exactly how fragile all this was, and held it anyway. Just to prove she could, in the city of Akhenaten, now half abandoned, you visit one of the old temples. Are cracked. Lizards own the place now. In a rear chamber, half hidden behind collapsed stone, you find a carving Nefertiti standing alone, arms raised to a tin, her face chipped, but still unmistakably hers. No one told you to erase this one. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they didn't. Dare you sit in the dust and stare? She's not gone. Not really. Just unlisted. History's official silence doesn't reach every corner. Some echoes refuse to fade. You leave a tiny offering. A date. Slightly squashed. Not because you think she needs it, but because you do. Back at your station, someone asks you if the queen ever ruled alone. You shrugged. You say possibly. You say, she was never really just a queen. You say, I still dream in her voice. They laugh nervously. You'll don't. And when you walk home that night, the sky pink with heat and old memory. You wonder if she's still out there somewhere. Not as a ghost or a goddess or a scribbled over name, but as the only one who never needed Aton to shine, asterisk, 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 you return to Akhenaten. Years later, with a different title and a slightly worse back, no longer a scribe, now a grain measurer. Lateral move. Less ink, more lifting. You're sent here too. Inspect storehouses that no longer store much of anything. The city still stands. Technically Akhenaten, once the dazzling dream of a pharaoh who loved the sun like a favorite child, is now a relic of enthusiasm left out in the weather. The wide boulevards are choked with sand. The white temples have yellowed, like teeth in a jar. The palace is silent, except for the occasional bat and the sound of stones remembering their purpose. You walk through it slowly, like someone moving through their own forgotten thoughts. Everything's still where it should be, just unconvinced. The great temple to Aten is still open to the sky, the roofless structure designed to bathe in sunlight. But now the sun feels less divine and more indifferent, burns without. Poetry. It doesn't care who worships it. The sacred altar is cracked, the offering tables are empty, except for a single dried fig that might have been ceremonial or just accidentally heroic. You visit what used to be the artisan district, crumbling. Walls still hold traces of color, the faint pink of a royal robe, the soft blue of a crown, the leftover joy of someone's best effort. You pass by the house of Thutmose, the royal sculptor, where once he crafted Nefertiti's famous bust, her face caught forever in that look of calm superiority and mild amusement, as if she's just been proven right again. Now her workshop is filled with dust and pieces of things that once mattered. A half-finished statue, a broken brush, a palette that still remembers paint. You sit on a low wall, one that no longer supports anything, and watch the light change. It's beautiful. Still, gold, pink, fire, the horizon glowing like a wound that never healed. You realize no one ever moved back here. No one claimed the city. It wasn't conquered. It wasn't burned. It was just quietly forgotten on purpose. The locals avoid it. Superstitious, maybe, or just practical. Too far from the river. Too full. Of ghosts. Too tied to a name no one says anymore. You write your report. Grain counts. 0. Storage quality. Poor. Infestation risk. High. You don't mention the silence or the way the stones seem to watch you leave. That's not your job anymore. Before you go, you scratch a symbol into one of the walls. Not your name. Just a small beetle, a scarab. Old habit, old protection. Not for the gods. It's just for you. Then you walk away from the city that once believed it could start over. The wind follows you, maybe leads you. It's hard to tell. And behind you, Akhenaten sits in the desert like a sentence that was never finished. You used to write his name every day, Amenhotep IV, then Akhenaten, Lord of the Two Lands. Beloved of Aten, you copied it onto papyrus scrolls, into temple walls, onto statues that stared too long at the horizon. You learned to draw his face. His crown, his favorite poses arms, outstretched to the sun, stomach soft with spiritual confidence. And now you're chiseling it all out. You're not the only one. The Empire has mobilized its most efficient tool, the Forgetter's Hammer. It starts slowly, a statue here, a cartouche there, a few nervous edits on royal lists. Then it spreads. Across cities, temples, time, your orders are clear. Remove all mention of the heretic pharaoh. Not debate, not explain, just remove. If Akhenaten had been a particularly unfortunate spelling error in divine handwriting, you, a former palace scribe turned cautious stoneworker, now spend your mornings scraping names you once inked with reverence. The irony is not lost on you. You kneel before a wall where he once smiled, that strange, serene grin, like a man in conversation with a warm plate. You lift your chisel. The stone is old, but stubborn. You chip. The sun watches. It always does. First, you erase his name, then his likeness, then his family. The daughters go next one by one, their faces reduced to uneven patches. The queen. Well, she's already half gone. You are told this is purification, restoration, a correction of cosmic balance. But it feels like you're unmaking a person. Like telling time to reverse until it forgets who it ever belonged to. Some walls fight back. Stone chips wrong. Cracks. Refuses to forget easily. Other times, the erasure is too perfect. A clean blankness that feels more ominous than any. Carving. You begin to dream of walls without memory. Cities that never happened. Sunlight that denies it ever touched those stones. In your quieter moments, you wonder, did it work? Did the gods forgive? Did the people forget? You hear a child in the market shout Aten while chasing a lizard. Her mother hushes her fast and hard, like the word itself might burn the air. You see priests praying to Amen again, their voices extra loud, as if volume can fill in years of absence. You walk past a shrine where someone scratched out Aten and recarved Osiris. The carving is messy, desperate. like a man shouting apologies and broken. Grammar, you never speak Akhenaten's name aloud anymore, but sometimes when alone, you trace the shape of it with your finger, not carving it, not writing it, just remembering how it used to feel to believe something could change. The cartouches are gone now, the records edited, the statues chipped, until they resemble weathered potatoes with artistic ambition. It's as if he never existed. Except he did. And you were there. You brush the stone dust from your hands. It sticks to your skin, chalky and insistent. Some memories are like that. They leave even when they're told not to. Asterisk years pass. Then more. Decades become the kind of silence that only empires can afford. The names of kings change. Temples are repainted. The priests return with their familiar robes and their endless ability to be right again. It shrinks from a god to a whisper to a suspicious stain on a temple ceiling, and yet, Akhenaten remains not openly, not proudly, but in the way strange dreams remain. The way odd smells linger in a room long after the door's been shut. The way your foot still remembers the shape of a sandal you haven't worn in years, you find. Him, sometimes in forgotten corners of scrolls. A line that doesn't match the rest, a name too scratched to be accidental. You find a sun disk doodled in the margins by a student who wasn't supposed to know that shape. You see a stone in a marketplace sold as garden decor. That definitely used to be part of a wall that once tried to change the world. They never found his real tomb. Not officially, you hear rumors. Shallow graves, stolen bones, misfiled sarcophagi. One body turns up with oddly feminine features and a crushed chest, and suddenly everyone's a scholar again. Theories blossom like papyrus in a gossip flood. Was he buried in Akhenaten? Was he moved? Was he erased so thoroughly that even his bones got confused? Don't know. You do know that every so often, a statue turns up. Broken, exaggerated, the lips too full, the stomach too soft, the eyes too inward-looking. No one wants it, but no one dares destroy it either. Sits in storerooms, collects dust, gets recatalogued every few generations as probably someone important. No one says the name, but you know the shape. And now you're old, your hands don't write anymore. They tremble too much. But your mind remembers the sunlit temples, the strange hymns. The time you carried a basket of figs across the city of Akhenaten and tripped in front of Nefertiti herself. She didn't laugh. Helped you up, said nothing. Walked away with that tall blue crown, slicing the air like a silent argument. You still remember? Sometimes. It's when the sun hits the right angle and your shadow falls beside you just so. You think about Aten. Not as a god, but as a question. A what if. A maybe. A memory with edges. Akhenaten didn't survive. Not properly. His city fell. His reforms reversed. His name scratched off every surface. But he left a dent, a ripple, a small, confused sunbeam lodged in the corner of Egypt's memory. And you were there. You saw it. You walked those bright streets. You squinted under that unmerciful light. You chiseled his name in, then chiseled it out. And now you whisper it to no one in particular. Akhenaten, a man who loved the sun too much, believed too hard, and asked a civilization to look up, not forward, not back, just up. You sit in the shade now. The breeze touches your face. You close your eyes, and quietly, softly, asterisk. Asterisk, you never trust the Nile. It's generous. Yes, it waters your fields, feeds your goats, floats your papyrus boats gently along, as if cradling an empire. But it also has a habit of stealing things. Not violently, just silently. Like a grandmother who borrows things for safekeeping and forgets to return them for 3 centuries. Whole temples, gone. Entire buildings. Carved with names no one remembers how to pronounce. The river doesn't care about gods. It just flows. Endlessly, impersonally. With the mood of a tired priest who's seen too much and stopped pretending to be impressed. You had now a stonecutter's assistant working on canal maintenance aren't here for religion. You're here for mud. You dredge it, move it. Try not to become part of it. But today, While clearing silt near a bend in the river, where no one usually bothers looking, your shovel hits something that doesn't askew. It clinks. You pause. You dig more carefully. Clear, this isn't pottery. It's not a rock. It's a floor. A stone slab etched. Covered in years of silt and fish residue, but definitely carved. You scrape, cough, shout for help. Others gather. What begins as another day of glorified mud shoveling becomes something else entirely. A temple. Small, sunken, crooked, forgotten. The roof's collapsed. The entrance is half swallowed by reeds. And there's a frog sitting on what used to be a sacred inscription. But it's a temple. You feel reverent. You also feel wet. Over the next days, you help clear more. A half wall appears.
Ow.
Then part of a column. The carving is simple but specific. A falcon-headed god. Maybe Horus. Maybe someone older. The inscriptions are faded, but a few names remain. Not royal names. Just people, builders, perhaps. Priests with eternally optimistic handwriting. This wasn't a major temple. Not the kind the priests paraded through. It was local, modest, but it mattered. To someone. And now the Nile, after swallowing it whole, has coughed it back up like an offering you forgot you gave. You wonder how many more are out there. Temples buried under river bends, shrines tucked beneath sandbars, altars carried downstream by floodwater, now disguised as part of a fishery. The Nile has always moved. You can't build permanence beside a god who shifts shape every season. You touch the wall. The stone is cool, gritty. It smells like damp time. You run your fingers over the carving of a bird. You think someone else touched this, carved it, worshipped it, then forgot it. Or maybe they didn't forget. Maybe the river just didn't ask. Back in camp, a scribe comes to record the find. He draws quickly, notes faintly, already thinking about dinner. Probably just a storage shrine, he mutters. You don't argue? But you notice how the light hits the carved falcon at just the right angle. You think, maybe the river didn't take it. Maybe it was hiding it. You never thought you'd find a god underwater. But here you are. Thigh deep in a marsh that smells like ancient laundry, brushing mud from what you're pretty sure is someone's sacred face. Stone, wide-eyed, still somehow dignified despite the algae mustache. You squint. It's either a deity or a remarkably patient statue of a man reacting to cold soup. Either way, it's watching you. The other workers gather around. Someone swears it's Hapi, the god of the Nile. Someone else says it's Calm. Another claims it's just Jeff. You don't know who Jeff is. No one does. But the name sticks, as do most things in this swamp. The statue is stuck, half buried in silt. Leaning awkwardly, as though trying to sneak out unnoticed. You dig, you slip. You inhale a small quantity of the river's opinion. And finally, with the help of 3 ropes and 4 bad decisions, the statue lurches free. It's beautiful. Now it's river-aged, like wine that was stored incorrectly and attended too many family reunions. The face is pocked, the beard chipped, but the eyes still hold that odd stillness you only see in old gods and really good gamblers. Next to the statue, you find offerings. Or what used to be offerings. A bowl, cracked, but still offering its shape. A bundle of redrapped herbs, mostly rot now. A handful of beads, their colors dulled, but determined. You imagine someone placing these with care, centuries ago, hoping for blessings or rain, or just a break from foot fungus. And now here you are, picking through the remnants like a spiritual archaeologist with waterlogged regrets. You catalog everything. Not officially, the scribe won't arrive until next week. So you use your own system. You line the items up on a flat rock and label them in your mind. Sad bowl, stubborn beads, questionable. Undul god with river complex, you feel something close to reverence. Also mildew. The truth is, this isn't the only drowned god. The Nile has dozens, maybe hundreds. Statues toppled by floods. Shrines relocated by water like temples playing a game of hide-and-seek. Some are still out there, sunk in channels no longer mapped. Others are found by fishermen, mistaken for cursed fish traps or excellent anchors. You wonder if the gods mind. If being underwater is embarrassing, or relaxing, or just part of the job, maybe they see it as a sabbatical from being worshipped. One of the older workers suggests reburying the statue. You shouldn't have pulled him up, he says. It's not good luck. You nod, but don't do it. Something about the way the god looks at the sky makes you feel like he's glad to be out. You sit beside him at the end of the day, your feet soaked, your hands smelling like secrets. The sun is setting behind the reeds. The water glows. You realize gently that not all forgotten things want to stay that way. Some just need someone to dig. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You weren't supposed to build a temple here. That's what the architect probably said. A long time ago, looking out over the shifting silt and suspiciously damped grass. But someone higher up insisted, maybe a noble, maybe a priest with too much confidence and not enough engineering sense. Maybe a pharaoh who liked the view. So they built anyway. Right by the river, on ground that size. When you walk on it, you currently scraping moss off the remnants of what used to be a staircase can confirm. This was a terrible idea. The temple was never tall, never grand. It had 3 rooms, a courtyard, and one slightly crooked statue of Anubis, who looked more tired than terrifying, but it mattered. Local villagers once brought baskets of dates here. Scribes taught children to write here. Priests sang morning hymns into air so humid it could write its own hymns back. And now it's ankle deep in mud and regret. You find layers of the place. One floor, then another beneath it, as if the temple kept trying to escape downward. You can almost hear the builders grumbling through time. It sank again.
Add more stone.
Try stacking it differently. Eventually they stopped fighting gravity and just worked with it. It's like trying to decorate a cake while it's melting. The inscriptions are awkward too. Some are clear and sharp, praising Sobek and Isis and whoever was in spiritual fashion that year. Others, less so, crooked, spaced unevenly. One wall looks like someone sneezed during every third hieroglyph. It's charming. In a we paid the apprentice kind of way. And then there's the curse. Not a real one. Not quite. Just a phrase, scratched behind the altar, small and rushed. A warning, who disturbs this place will sink as we did. You stare at it for a while. It's not ominous, just tired. A footnote left by someone who'd had one flood too many and wasn't allowed to complain to management. You feel seen? You step outside. The structure's bones stick up like old teeth. Reeds have claimed the courtyard. A crocodile watches from the far bank, possibly curious, possibly divine, possibly both. You sit for a while. A breeze rolls through, rare, cool, carrying the scent of silt, fish, and stories too tired to rise again. And you wonder about the people who built this. Did they believe it would last forever? Did they expect their names to echo in chants for centuries? Or did they know deep down that the river always wins, not with rage, but with patience? You pack up your tools. One more measurement. One more rubbing of a partially drowned inscription that reads something like, "All glory to thee," before dissolving into nonsense. The river burbles beside you. It's innocent, cheerful, as if it's never swallowed anything sacred in its entire life. You don't argue. You just leave the altar alone. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You wouldn't have stayed. That's what you tell yourself. Staring at the half-flooded remains of a priest's quarters, a stone cell with 2 niches. One broken bed platform and a clay jar still pretending to be useful. The roof is gone. The door is missing. A heron has claimed the back corner and gives you a look like it inherited the place. Legally, but the priests stayed. Even as the river crept in like an old guest with too many stories. Even as reeds claimed. The prayer stones and fish darted through the courtyard like unbaptized spirits with scales. Even when everyone else packed up their offerings and their amulets and moved. Uphill, the priests didn't. You find a carved inscription above the doorframe, almost worn smooth. We remain so the gods remain. The script is simple, tight, neat. Written not for grandeur, but for clarity. For permanence. You try to imagine the man who carved it. Middle-aged, probably. Devoted, possibly damp. There are records vaguely. Bits of scroll, badly copied fragments of temples refusing to close. Of priests who insisted their gods would protect them, or at least keep the floor dry. But the gods had other concerns. The Nile kept rising, and the priests, they stayed anyway. You imagine the routines. It's the daily songs sung to an empty sanctuary, the offerings left on altars the fish could reach. You imagine a priest lighting incense while his feet are ankle-deep in water, still wearing the full linen regalia, still humming ancient verses, still telling the wet air that order must be maintained. You find more signs. Small bench still facing the shrine. A waterlogged jar sealed with bitumen inside. A handful of lotus petals, now mush. A comb. A half-written prayer. None of this should be here, but it is. You sit in the broken doorway, your boots in a puddle that smells like yesterday in the year 1272 BCE at the same time. You wonder what it means to be faithful when everything is literally falling apart, when the roof leaks, when the gods don't answer, when your entire religion is being colonized by mold. But still, someone swept this floor. Someone folded linen here. Someone believe, not in miracles. In duty, you look up. The ceiling's long gone, but the sky's clear, a bright empty blue that refuses to comment on your thoughts. A frog hops past your foot with the kind of indifference only frogs and very old clergy can pull off. You rise carefully. The stones beneath you wobble slightly, unsure if they still want to be a floor. Before you leave, you trace the carved words with your finger. We remain, so the gods remain. You don't say anything, you just nod. As if someone might be watching, as if silence itself deserves the courtesy of acknowledgement. The heron squawks behind you, possibly in blessing, possibly in protest. You don't turn around. You walk back into the sun, leaving the flooded temple behind. But something about it still follows. You're not here for treasure. That's the first thing you remind yourself as you kneel in the mud. Digging with your hands because your shovel snapped 2 minutes ago, and the replacement has been missing since late last year. This isn't about gold or jewels or statues with smug expressions. You're here for whispers, and they don't shout. You pull up another fragment. It's flat palm-sized, possibly a piece of an offering tray or a ceremonial bread plate. It has lines carved into it, not writing exactly, more like polite suggestions in the direction of meaning. A faded bird, a half circle, symbol that might be an eye or a spilled ink blot, trying to become sacred. It's quiet work. You dig, you wipe, you squint. You tell yourself it's important, even when what you're holding looks like a failed pottery experiment thrown out by a god with bad aim. Around you, the excavation site simmers in soft heat. Not the sharp sun of planting season, just the warm, still dampness of river weather. Everything smells like silt and stories. Some finds are easy, bits of statue, broken jars, sandals with more personality than structural integrity. Others, mysterious. A lump of stone with tool marks on only one side, a carved crocodile no longer attached to anything, a box of bones, bird, lizard, or priest's lunch remains. No one's sure, and every time you find something you think, why was it here? Was it buried in haste? Lost in a flood? Left on purpose? As part of a ritual that made sense to everyone except you? You write the tags, you draw the diagrams, pretend the map is accurate, even though half the site keeps shifting like a shy memory trying not to be remembered too clearly. Some of the younger workers ask questions. What did this mean? Was this a shrine? Do you think the gods lived here? You answer carefully. Maybe, possibly, depends on the day. You've learned not to be too certain about the past. It doesn't reward arrogance. It just waits for you to guess wrong and then shifts slightly in the mud, as if laughing underwater. One afternoon, you find something strange. A child's handprint pressed into clay, long hardened, perfectly preserved. Not a noble, not a scribe, just someone. A small someone. A reminder that temples weren't just for priests and rulers and carved. Jackal heads. They were lived in, cleaned, swept, painted, sat in, napped in, and at least once, touched by a child who wasn't supposed to be near the wet clay and probably got scolded. Afterward, you sit back and stare at the print. It's small, still curved. The fingers are uneven, as if the child was nervous or excited or didn't understand that gods require straight lines. You don't log it right away. You just look.
Ow.
Because sometimes, the most sacred thing in a temple isn't the altar, it's the part someone accidentally left behind. Asterisk, reconstruction, they call it. As if a pile of broken limestone and water-damaged foundation, blocks could simply be asked to remember where they came from. As if you could put history back together like a dropped loaf of bread, cracked, dirty, possibly sat on by a goat, but still technically bread. You're assigned to the southern retaining wall, which is generous considering there's barely a wall left. It's more a philosophical suggestion of where a wall once had ambitions. You stand knee-deep in rubble, surrounded by numbered stakes, tangled rope, and one increasingly confident beetle who has claimed your lunch rock as a throne. The plan is simple. Raise the old stones, set the base, reposition the columns, realign the axis to match celestial records that were last verified during a lunar calendar system no one uses anymore. You, a former apprentice scribe turned reluctant stonemason, begin with the least cracked piece. You clean it. You align it. You curse its weight with quiet reverence. The stone says nothing. It just sits there, pretending it didn't spend the last 600 years lounging under reeds and frogs. Most of the reconstruction involves guessing. There are no blueprints. Only fragments of walls and prayer texts that read like someone tried to document architecture while being chased by wasps. Some pieces fit. Most don't. A few you turn upside down and pretend the missing parts are symbolic. There's an inspector. Of course, every day he walks through the site with a stylus and a brow so furrowed it could plant crops. He asks you questions like, "Are you sure this matches the Third Dynasty alignment protocol?" And you respond with vague phrases like, "Spiritually, yes." He frowns, scribbles something, walks away. Sometimes you wonder what this temple was like before the river came. Not just the structure, but the sounds, the smells, the rhythm. A footsteps in its halls, a goat bleating outside, a priest mumbling half-asleep chants at dawn, a child dropping a jar and blaming the gods. It was never pristine. Nothing sacred as you place the next block. It's chipped on one side and deeply. Suspicious of its new position, you hammer it gently, like coaxing a nervous animal into a too small stall. Fits mostly. You lean back and admire the result. One wall fragment that looks 17% intentional. Later, you sit in the shadow of what used to be the shrine. The sunlight slants across the rubble in long strips, as if the gods themselves are still measuring. What's left? You unwrap your lunch. The beetle returns. You offer it a crumb. It refuses. Beetles have standards. You sigh. You're not rebuilding this temple for the gods, or for tourists, or even for yourself. You're rebuilding it because some things deserve to be stood back up, even if they fall again tomorrow. You brush the dust from your hands. Stand up and reach for the next stone. It doesn't fit. Of course it doesn't. You try again anyway. Asterisk, you. Find a name today, or at least the part of one. 3 glyphs scratched into a piece of plaster no bigger than your hand. A reed, a folded cloth, and the tip of a vulture's wing. Could be a priest. Could be a baker. Could be someone who once sneezed during a festival and became locally infamous. You run your thumb across the carvings, feeling the indentations like wrinkles in someone else's memory. The scribe on site squints at it and says, "Might be. The Zemetep." Then again, it might be something else entirely. The plaster breaks in half 5 minutes later when the wind shifts and your assistant steps. Backward in divine timing. So that's that. Another half-name lost to the Nile's peculiar. A sense of humor, you find others, too, half-carved dedications, smudged marks on amphory, forgotten graffiti on the underside of temple stones. Names that someone once thought would last forever. Names scratched quickly. Maybe out of pride, maybe loneliness, maybe just boredom. One, hidden inside a niche. I was here. Simple, arrogant, human. You scrape the sand back from the next. Block and see nothing. Smooth stone, blank as a lie. You stare at it, waiting, as if maybe the right light or the right breath will make the names reappear. They don't. The thing about working with temples isn't the grandeur. It's the absences, the ghost shapes, outlines of inscriptions eaten away by time, weather, and people who thought eternity was a reasonable expectation. You meet a young student from the capital who asks why so many names are gone. Did they get erased, she asks, like on purpose? You shrug. Some were most just forgot. She looks confused. How do you forget a person, you think? Easily. One lost scroll. Yeah. One generation too busy to repeat a story. One flood. That carried away the last bowl with their name on it. History is a sieve, and most names are BREAD-CRUMBS. Later, you find a list or a piece of one on the back of a broken panel. Maybe a temple registry, maybe a shopping list. It includes 5 names, a crude sketch of a goat, and something that might be the word for soup. You copy it carefully into your notes, knowing full well no one will ever confirm what it really meant. But still, you write it down. Because once someone wrote it down, forgot it would be forgotten. And now, centuries later, you are sitting in a pile of dust, trying to remind time of something it wasn't even trying to erase, just something it misplaced. You take a piece of charcoal, and on the back of your own notebook, in a corner one checks, you write, I was here too. No one will notice. But that's not the point. You try to say the name correctly. You really do. The guide told you it was Khonsu, but the scribe next to you insists it's Cain's. While someone with a scholarly scroll and far too much ink stain on their chin swears it's Kunosh, you say it 3 different ways in one sentence. No one agrees. No one corrects you either. They just blink, nod, and continue brushing dirt from what might be the god's ankle, or might be a really committed table leg. And yet, despite the confusion, the temple doesn't collapse. The statues don't hiss. The sky remains uncracked. Because the gods, as it turns out, don't care how you say their names. They've heard it all before, Khonsu. God of the moon, healer of the sick, wearer of a long sidelock that no barber has, ever successfully styled, sits calmly in his partially buried shrine. He's missing a nose, half a shoulder, and possibly his patience. But you stand before him anyway, practicing pronunciation like a student facing a celestial spelling bee. Khun-Su. You whisper. Silence. Double quotes can dash shu. No more silence, but now it feels almost amused. You sigh and revert to your favorite fallback. Oh, wise one, moon lad. Still nothing. Stillness. Still that sense of being watched by something old, enough to find your entire civilization a passing noise. You kneel and clean the base of the statue. The inscription is clearer here. A hymn. Or a recipe. Or a list of royal duties. You've learned not to assume. Once you spent 3 days translating a tablet you thought was sacred doctrine, only to realize it was a ledger for barley storage, and one extremely passive-aggressive complaint about goat theft. The moon god remains serene. You remember a story? Told over warm lentils by a priest who smelled like incense and disappointment, that Khonsu once swallowed the moon and vomited it back up to reset the calendar. You don't know if that's true, but it seems plausible. Time behaves strangely. In temples, you look up, half expecting to see a moon in broad daylight, making a smug appearance just for dramatic effect. Nothing, just sun and wind and your own breath. Coming a little slower now, you finish your cleaning, stand up, bow, awkwardly. Thank you, however, it said. The statue remains motionless. But somehow it feels acknowledged. The others call you over. Someone's found another statue. Possibly Bastet, possibly a cat, possibly a stylized shoe. You leave Khonsu behind, but not entirely. You walk away repeating the name under your breath. Like a tongue trying to remember a tune, the syllables slide in and out of place. You forget which version is correct. But the god, whoever he is, doesn't seem to mind. Because worship, turns out, is less about precision and more about attention. And attention in this place is a rare and holy currency. Asterisk, asterisk, you were there when it happened, not when the temple was built, not when it was consecrated with incense and singing and sandals made of special holy leather. But when the roof finally gave up and drifted downstream, like a divine raft headed nowhere in particular. It had been cracking for weeks. You'd hear it in the mornings, soft little noises above your head, while you cataloged pottery shards that all looked vaguely like elbows. It's just a creak here, a groan there. It's the kind of sounds buildings make when they're debating retirement. But don't want to say it out loud. You tried not to notice. You weren't in charge of roofs. You were in charge of labeling things like bone fragment, possibly bird, possibly priest's snack. But then came the rain. Rain is rare here, revered. Even usually it arrives like a guest who's already apologizing for showing up. But that day it came heavy, not like a blessing. More like a frustrated God shaking out a very wet blanket. You took shelter in the main hall, you and 3 others, all trying to look unconcerned as water trickled down the walls and pooled politely under the old altar. You looked up. Idea. There it was, the roof, sagging slightly, bulging with water. Wobbling just a bit too much like a stomach after a regrettable lunch, and then it didn't collapse. It left. A section of it lifted, peeled, and drifted away like it had. Someplace better to be. A splash, a long pause, and then a noise none of you could describe. Somewhere between a sigh and a gulp, the river had taken it. The silence afterward was impressive, reverent. Even the frogs seemed shocked. You all stood there, soaking, staring up at the sudden rectangle of sky. A perfect hole framed by centuries of slowly eroding confidence. One of your colleagues said, very quietly, "Well, that's gone." You nodded, because what else do you say when a sacred roof sails off like a confused funeral boat?
After the
Rain, you ventured down to the bank. You found bits of it, carvings bobbing in the current, a broken beam lodged against a rock, a cluster of lotus blossoms tangled in a corner like a shrine trying to rebuild itself in transit. You didn't. Try to retrieve it. It felt wrong, like trying to retrieve a sigh, or a lesson, or the upper floor of your memory that's decided to live by the river now. Instead, you wrote it down. You logged it in the records. Roof section displaced due to rain-induced structural instability. Which is true, but the frogs know what really happened. They watched it float away. They blinked once, then hopped back into the reeds. No commentary needed. Sometimes when you pass the empty hall, you look up and see the hole. It hasn't been repaired. Probably never will be. The gods don't seem bothered. Maybe they prefer it open, asterisk, 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 you keep returning. Not because the temple is whole, it isn't. Not because the gods are watching, they might be. But only in the way old statues watch, with cracked patience and low expectations. You return because the river keeps giving things back, and occasionally taking more. Today, the Nile is low. A rare moment when its breath pauses and the muck peels back, just enough to show you where your work has been erased. The corner of a foundation you remember setting 2 seasons ago is now lopsided and distant, as if it's considering defecting to the next bend in the river. You wade out, boots squelching. You prod the mud with a stick. You find something, not a statue. Not a carving, just a brick. Simple brick. Water smoothed and insistent. You pull it out, and for a moment, it looks surprised to see you. You turn it over. There's a mark on one side, a thumbprint, small. Maybe from the brickmaker, maybe from someone stacking. Maybe just the accidental echo of a forgotten hand. You place it on the wall with the others. You don't say anything. The others nod. The wall will fall again. You know this. The water always returns. You think about what's been lost. Temples drowned. Names dissolved. Offerings rotted into riverbed. And yet, somehow, there's still something here. Story that refuses to stay quiet. A corner of stone that reappears every season like a memory too stubborn to fade properly. You remember the faces of those who've worked with you. The builder who sings to the stones. The girl who draws glyphs in the sand with her toe. The old man who swears crocodiles are sacred unless they interrupt lunch. You remember the man who walked away after the first flood, and the one who stayed through the fourth? Not all temples are made of stone. Some are made of shared grumbling, soaked sandals, and the sound of breath between lifting things that don't want to be lifted. You walk the perimeter, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick like you're drawing. A map no one will read, You pause at what used to be the entrance, just 2 stones now, angled politely toward the river. Like doormen who stayed too long after the guests left. Someone asked what this temple was called. You shrugged. We don't know. Maybe it never had a name. They frown. That's sad, I think. Not really, not every place needs a name to matter. Not every god needs a temple to be remembered. And not every ruin is a failure. And sometimes it's just a place the river chose to pause. You sit by the water as the sun lowers. The frogs start to sing. The wind picks up, tugging gently at your sleeves. You hear laughter from the camp. The smell of warm bread, slightly burnt, drifts through the air, and you wonder, not for the first time, if anything ever really leaves the river, or if the river just holds it all until we're ready to remember. You're not on the guest list. That becomes clear when you see the guards. Not the regular temple guards. These ones are shinier. Their sandals match. Their hair is so oiled it reflects the moon. One of them sneezes, and it sounds like a command. The banquet is tonight. Everyone's talking about it. Well, not everyone. Just the people who own more than one tunic. You're helping carry jars of beer through a back corridor that smells like fermented honey and mild class anxiety. The scent of the banquet reaches. You before the doorway does, roasted goose, onions cooked until they're weeping politely. Lotus wine thick enough to stain both your teeth and your reputation. Music hums in the distance, soft and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of someone very full and very smug. You peek around a column. The main hall is glowing. Oil lamps everywhere. The walls flicker with painted gods who look vaguely amused. You see, dancers not the kind you know, but the elite kind, with gold strings on their wrists and smiles that mean absolutely nothing and everything at once, and the food. Oh, the food. A table piled like a shrine to overindulgence. Flatbreads still warm, figs soaked in wine, eels roasted and curled into decorative shame spirals. A roast duck positioned as if it were apologizing to no one in particular. Sauces, stews, little bowls, filled with nuts that are probably more expensive than your house. You watch a priest scoop honey onto a cake that's already frosted with honey. He laughs. The man next to him laughs too, probably for political reasons. Someone asks for more wine. Someone else falls gently out of their seat, is caught by a servant who moves like this as a daily ritual, because it is. You're told not to watch, but how can you not? This isn't just food. It's a performance of appetite, a ritual in which hunger is not resolved, but upgraded to art. You think, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get the leftovers. You won't, you think. Maybe the priests will offer the remains to the gods, and the gods will be full. And someone will slip you a plate. They won't, you think. Maybe you can sweep the floor later and inhale something that once stood near a pomegranate. Possibly someone claps. The scribe rises and begins reciting poetry, long winding lines about beauty, wealth, and a woman whose eyes were as deep as fish ponds during lotus season. You nod, respectfully. From the shadows, you shift your jar to the other arm. Your shoulder aches. Your stomach mutters. Something rude. You consider chewing a corner of your sleeve for texture, but still, something to see, even from a distance. Even from behind a column. Even from the wrong side of the goose. Because in that moment, you see what the banquet is really for. Not the food. Not the drink. But the confirmation that someone, somewhere, gets to feel full on purpose. And you. You return to the storeroom. The jar is empty, but the smell still lingers. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You finally get a taste. Not because you were invited, no. Your name is still firmly lodged in the no thanks column. But a kind cook with a distracted conscience hands you a slice of something called royal stuffing. It's warm, it's dense. It's spiced with so many herbs it smells like a garden arguing with itself. You chew. You nod. You regret. The thing about elite Egyptian cuisine is that it doesn't care about your insides. This food is designed for people with strong stomachs, weak judgment, and access to private latrines. You have none of those. The stuffing fights you. Halfway down, a war of textures. No bread, meat, raisins, and something chewy that may have once been ambition. You swallow. It wins. Later, you're offered a roasted onion, soft, caramelized, soaked in honey and regret. It tastes like a fever dream with good seasoning, delicious but suspicious. Your mouth smiles. Your intestines file a complaint. They serve fish. Of course, always fish. Grilled, stuffed, dried, salted, steamed, or fermented into a condiment so powerful it once ended a marriage. You avoid that one. The elite love combinations. Goose with date sauce, duck and lentil mash. Something called milk of Horus, which is not milk and absolutely not Horus. It's a drink that tastes like fermented chalk with floral notes of we dare you. You sip politely. Regret again. You begin to understand this isn't food. It's proof. Proof of access. Proof of power. Proof that you can afford indigestion as a lifestyle. You've watched a noblewoman eat a honey cake the size of a sandal without blinking. She's not hungry. She's declaring her independence from moderation. You, meanwhile, chew your second stolen morsel like someone tiptoeing through a landmine. Of spices, your lips tingle. Your stomach hums a warning. A servant walks by with a tray of wine. You take a sip. Sweet, thick, older than your career. It clings to your throat like a vine. You want to cough, but that would reveal your presence. You don't. Someone else eats an egg dipped in onion paste and begins to glow with a kind of divine discomfort. You recognize the look. It's the look of someone who has offended a minor god with their pancreas. You see a scribe take notes while chewing. He nods to himself, then abruptly leaves the room, walking very fast. His notes flutter behind him. One reads, "Too much cumin, possible betrayal." You wonder how anyone digests this, and then you remember they don't. They purge. There are back rooms for that, decorative basins, discreet servant holding a polite cloth. Eating at this level is not about fullness. It's a performance of opulence followed by controlled collapse. You decline the next offering, a custard made with duck fat, goat's milk, and possibly a threat. You find a bench outside the kitchen. You sit, you breathe, you quietly think. Every bland lentil stew you've ever had. A priest walks by and offers you a fig. You say yes, and for once, your body says thank you. Asterisk, asterisk, the wine arrives in waves, not glasses, not cups. Waves, amphorae, as tall as your ribcage, are uncorked, like sacred declarations. The air thickens, grapes, spice, heat, and the faint smell of someone making a series of decisions they won't remember tomorrow. You're still not invited, but you're close enough to feel dizzy by proximity. You're meant to be carrying linens, but someone else took the linens. You're just standing here now, holding a cloth that's trying to become irrelevant. Inside, the party tilts. The dancers begin. 6 of them, gold bracelets, loose linen, eyes painted like owls mid-revenge. They move slowly, deliberately, hips tracing the outlines of forgotten vowels. The guests murmur. The wine speaks louder. One noble shouts something in praise of Hathor, or possibly his own elbow. It's unclear. You find yourself next to a scribe, not your usual sort. This one's flushed, swaying, enthusiastic in the way only someone 6 goblets into spiritual communion can be. He smiles like he solved everything and gestures for you to sit. You do? He leans in, whispers, "I wrote a hymn." You nod. It seems believable, he continues, voice wobbling. To joy, to wine, to forgetting. Then he pats his satchel, from which emerges a folded sheet of palm fiber with suspiciously wet corners. He unrolls it reverently, begins to recite. Praise to the cup whose bottom I see too often. Praise to the grapes woe became better than themselves, praise to the feet that stomped them and the mistakes they gave us permission to make. He pauses for reaction. You applaud softly. He beams. A dancer spins. A priest sings something, but the lyrics dissolve under laughter and the sound of someone falling into a tray of dates. Ow, ow. No one helps them. They simply remain, sprawled, sticky, and contemplative. You sip a cup someone abandoned, sweet, sour somewhere. Between fermented wisdom and liquid apology, the scribe continues his hymn, now more musical, more vertical, more like a man trying to ascend via tone alone. The verses include praise for soft cushions, forgiving sandals, and the ability to forget specific ex-lovers by name. You realize the hymn is good, actually good, but no one is listening, because the room has begun its descent, a slow unraveling. The kind where people start clapping off beat and calling each other by titles they haven't earned. Someone calls you Grand Vizier of Napkins. Accept this with solemnity. Another servant passes by with a tray of grapes. You reach for one, it rolls away. You chase it briefly. For remembering dignity isn't included in your job description, the scribe falls asleep mid-stanza. You gently take the hymn from his hand. Fold it. Pocket it. You'll copy it later. Or lose it in the laundry. Time will decide. The music lingers as you step outside. The air is cooler now. The moon is out, reflecting off spilled wine like a god licking its lips. You sit on a low stone wall and let your head rest against the warm stone. Inside, the hymn is forgotten. But you remember. It happens quietly, one by one. The guests drift into unconsciousness, not the gentle dozing of tired nobility, but the collapsed sprawl of overfed statues who have given up on posture. Someone's crown rolls across the floor. A sandal is repurposed as a wine stopper. Priest is gently humming into a bowl of lentils. You wait. You all wait, and then a nod. The signal moves through the kitchen like lightning, disguised as a shrug. This is your moment. The servant's feast isn't announced. There's no invitation, no harpist, no poetic hymn to figs. It simply unfolds. Quietly, efficiently, as if joy has a job to do, and only 20 minutes before the guests wake up again and start asking for grapes by color. You're handed a plate, it's chipped, it's a little warm, and filled, actually filled with food. Real food. The kind you saw from behind the curtain, but never tasted. Spiced duck. Cracked barley bread still steaming. A heap of mashed dates that smells like someone's distant dream of luxury. You sit on a kitchen step with 10 others, all holding their plates like sacred scrolls. No one talks for the first few bites. It's not reverence. It's caloric disbelief. There's laughter, eventually. Someone tells a joke about the high priest's wig. Someone else mimics the noble who sang to his wine goblet earlier. A quiet ripple of happiness spreads like oil over soup, thin, but golden. You're halfway through your lentils when someone sets down a bowl of leftover honey-glazed onions. The room pauses. This is treasure. This is diplomacy. A spoon appears. Sharing begins. You eat slowly, carefully, as if you might wake up and realize. You're there. This is just another errand. But the food stays warm. You dip bread into stew so thick it clings. Like flattery, you sip beer that's less sour than usual. You eat a fig that tastes like forgiveness. No one says don't eat too much. No one says leave some for the gods. Gods are asleep, drooling gently in gold chairs. You lean against the wall, full, not extravagantly, just quietly, responsibly, wonderfully full. It's full. And full feels strange, like you've borrowed someone else's stomach. You can hear yours negotiating. Is this a trap? Is this ceremonial? Will we be punished for chewing this slowly? Outside, a dog barks. Flute plays a note and immediately regrets it. Sky is velvet. Someone hands you a second helping. Pretend to resist, then accept, because resisting warm bread is a theological error. This isn't a banquet for power. It's one for survival. The bread is torn, not sliced. The jokes are recycled, but better this time. Someone starts humming a tune the drunk scribes him, but rephrased to be about stew. It works, and for a few soft minutes, time pauses. The nobles will rise soon, confused and sticky. The basins will need scrubbing. The wine stains will become your morning problem. But for now, you chew, you smile, you are improbably enough. Asterisk, asterisk, it always ends this way. The music stops. The lamps flicker lower. The noble guests resemble overturned statues that lost a polite war with gravy. The air smells like sweet wine, duck fat, and slow regret. You tighten your sash. You've eaten, you've laughed, you were briefly full. And alive and human now. It's time to pay for that. Cleanup begins. Someone groans under a table. Another clings to a column like it personally betrayed him. A priest is asleep in the fountain, smiling, possibly having a vision, possibly just cold. You step around him with the reverence one reserves for either prophets or drunks. You begin. With the plates, there are so many. It's flat ones, wide ones shaped like sacred fish, ones that were definitely used to crush something that wasn't food. Each one sticky in its own way, some with honey. Some with something more mysterious, a theological goo of uncertain purpose. You scrape, you rinse, you scrape again. The water in the basin becomes a stew of remnants, dreams, and one very confused olive. Someone else collects the cups. Wine dregs smell like arguments. You pour them out one by one onto the courtyard stones. It looks like an offering. It isn't. The dancer's anklet is found beneath a roast goose. A shoe floats in the fish sauce. Spoon is discovered lodged into a decorative lotus, now demoted to functional napkin. You mop. The floor responds like it resents the attention. 1. Servant hums the scribe's hymn again, this time as a dirge. Praise to the cup, whose bottom I see too often. They trail off. The mop bucket sloshes in agreement. The noble guests remain mostly unconscious, or pretending to be. Their stomachs rise and fall like small spoiled boats. One mutters. Something about papyrus's interest rates. Another whispers the name of a cheese. You gather the tablecloths. They're stiff with sauce. One of them has hieroglyphs traced in lentil paste, possibly a joke, possibly a heresy. You fold it carefully. You don't ask questions. Eventually, the banquet room returns to its natural state, empty, echoing, smelling faintly of roast onion and divine shame. You pause by the doorway. There's a bowl left, untouched, perfect. Dates. Figs. 2 small slices of honey cake, still stacked as if they're waiting for someone who forgot to show up. You think about taking it, instead you cover it with cloth. Let it be a mystery. A joke for the gods, a dessert for some other life. Outside, the sun's not yet risen, but the sky hints at it, a slow stretch of pink that looks like light thinking about responsibility. You stretch your back. You've been on your feet for hours. You've seen things that defy reason and basic hygiene, and yet you smile. Because you were there. Not as a guest, not even as a proper servant, but as a witness. A cleanup poet. Ghost recorder of human excess. The food is gone. The guests are passed out. But the mess, the glorious, sticky, improbable mess, remains. And you? You're the one who gets to clean up history. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The gods are always invited. Even when they're not on the guest list. Even when the goose is undercooked. Even when someone drops a sacred chalice into the lentil stew and pretends it was intentional. Someone will raise a cup and call their name. Praise to Hathor. Blessings of Osiris. Let's hope Ara isn't watching. Pouring wine at the far end of the table. Try not to laugh. You've heard enough divine name-dropping tonight to fill a temple wall. Only none of the gods showed up. Not officially. No thundering voices. No flickering omens. Just oil lamps and overripe figs. And yet the rituals continue. Each dish is announced with a dedication. This duck is for Anubis. May he guide it well into our stomachs. Someone toasts the moon. Someone else gives thanks to Bastet for the cheese, though you're fairly certain she had nothing to do with it. The priests look nervous. There's a reason this isn't just food. This is a performance of piety with roast garnish. Each banquet is half feast, half sacrifice, all politics. You serve the nobility, but you're also serving the gods, or at least pretending to. A silver plate is placed on the altar near the back, an offering. It holds the finest cuts. The most golden bread, a drizzle of honey that glows like ambition. No one eats from it. That's for raw, or for appearance, or both. You don't ask which dot, but then something happens. cat climbs onto the offering table. You watch. Silently, as it sniffs the duck, turns in a circle, and begins to eat delicately, reverently. Like a minor goddess pretending not to be a street animal. The room stills. No one moves, because this might be a sign. The priest coughs and declares, "Behold." Bastet accepts our offering. The guests murmur. Someone claps. Someone else starts crying. You just try not to spill the beer. The cat finishes, licks a paw with ceremonial precision, and leaps down, utterly uninterested in her sudden sainthood. The priest bows. Everyone bows. You. It. Nods slightly, unsure of protocol when dining beside. The divine, you realize then that gods don't need to appear. They're already here. In every fig, in every toast, in every nervous glance toward the altar when a dish arrives to cold. The whole banquet is a stage, and the gods are the audience that never interrupts. Later, you help clear the plates. The offering plate is still there, half empty now, half sacred. You carry it to the back, careful not to drip honey on your tunic. The cat reappears. You hand her a fig, she ignores it. You wonder if the gods get bored of all this, or if they just keep watching, waiting for the moment someone says their name. Just enough sincerity to make it real again. You whisper a name, any name. You. Don't expect an answer, but you leave a little extra duck on the plate. Just in case, asterisk. You notice it the moment you walk back into the hall. Not the food, not the music, not the half-slumped noble who seems to be communicating telepathically with a loaf of bread. No, it's the scent. The air is no longer air, it's a festival of smells that tried to form a government and failed. Perfume. So much perfume, it wafts, it clings, it invades. Every guest is marinated in a different blend. Lotus oil, frankincense, cinnamon, and something called heaven's breath that smells like a cinnamon date lost in a wine barrel. You try not to breathe through your nose. Your eyes water anyway. Perfume is status. It says, I don't labor. It says I can afford to smell like a myth. And at these banquets, it's ladled on like soup. The nobles don't dab. They anoint. One guest moves past you in a cloud of blue myrrh, trailing notes of melon, sandalwood, and mild financial corruption. Another gestures wildly while discussing harvest taxes, and you're hit with a vapor that smells like floral justice. And also possibly garlic. There's no ventilation. The windows are shut to keep the bugs out. The doors are closed to keep the prestige in. So the air, what little is left of it, swirls like an angry ghost made of spices and social pressure. The dancers have started sweating, gracefully but still. They wipe your brow. Comes away smelling like 3 different gods in one. Questionable merchant. You watch a priest take a deep breath before reciting a hymn. He gets halfway through before coughing. The scent of divine approval is currently fighting the scent of spoiled date pudding for dominance. One noblewoman passes out, not dramatically. She just quietly tips sideways onto a pile of cushions, a half-eaten fig still perched in her fingers like she's posing for a painting titled Regret and Apricot. No one rushes to her aid. It's a banquet, not a rescue mission. You try to find the clean air near the servants' corridor, but even there the scent has colonized. A low-ranking cupbearer is fanning himself with a bread platter. You join him? Neither of you speaks. Words require oxygen, then someone lights incense, as if the air hadn't suffered enough. It's supposed to refresh the senses. Instead, it kicks the existing aroma pile into a higher gear. Your brain starts cataloging smells involuntarily. Rose petal, goat sweat, overripe melon, cedar, sandalwood, too much sandalwood, possibly sandal. You wonder what the gods think of this. Do they appreciate the effort? Or are they wheezing behind their divine veils, wondering why humans equate holiness with olfactory assault? You sneak outside for a moment, just one moment, and the breeze, soft, unperfumed, slightly fishy, hits you like a prayer. It smells like reeds in reality. You almost weep. You return inside, reluctantly. The feast isn't over. Perfumes are still dueling. But you tuck that breath of fresh air into your memory. Something real, something plain, and it smells wonderfully. Like nothing. Asterisk, 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 you were told there would be entertainment. You imagined music, dancers maybe. A quiet flute, a slow harp. Someone gently tapping a drum made of ethical goat hide. What you get instead is something else. The first act is a poet. He stumbles forward, wearing too much linen and not enough hesitation. He announces his name as he who sings with ink, and then proceeds to recite something that sounds like a love letter to a melon. Not a metaphorical melon, an actual melon. You can't follow it. You try. There's a verse about roundness divine, stanza involving the juice of truth, and a closing line that might have been romantic if it hadn't compared someone's. Breath to a wet marketplace at noon, polite applause follows. You clap too. Out of fear, the next performer is a juggler. Not a good one. He arrives with 3 carved lotus bowls and the confidence of a man who has never dropped anything until now. He drops the first bowl mid-spin. It lands in a stew. The second bounces off a noble's knee. The third, he never throws. He just looks at it for a while, then bows and leaves. The audience is unsure if that was performance art or the slow collapse of his career. Then comes the monkey. It has a hat. That's all you really remember. Because the moment it enters the room, it lets out a shriek, runs across the banquet table, and disappears into the curtain with what appears to be someone's sandal. A servant follows. So does a scribe. So does a very small dog. There's a pause. Then someone, perhaps desperate, to reset the tone, starts playing a reed flute. It's soft, off-key, a little desperate. Like a musical apology for everything that's just occurred, a dancer returns. You've seen her before, which is good, graceful, focused, aware of her ankles. But the air is thick with distraction. Now, and her performance lands somewhere between ritual elegance and please look anywhere but at the curtain where the monkey is still hiding. You help carry out a tray of roasted nuts during the chaos. One falls, you pick it up. Consider offering it to the monkey. Instead, you eat it. It tastes like defeat, but lightly salted. Eventually, the high priest stands and announces, "Let us give thanks for the gifts of joy and surprise." This is his way of saying, "That's enough now." Everyone claps again. The clapping sounds more like relief than enthusiasm. You glance toward the curtain. The monkey pokes its head out, still wearing the hat, still undefeated. The music fades. The guests return to their cups. Someone mutters, "Well, it was memorable." Someone else says, "Next year, no melon poetry." You return to your post, by the wine jugs, wondering if this is what divine entertainment looks like. Maybe the gods are laughing. Or maybe they sent the monkey on purpose. You wouldn't put it past Bastat. After all, she'll never RSVPs. But she'll always send someone. Asterisk. You thought a banquet was about food? It's not. It's about the seats, the first thing you learn, long before you're allowed to carry anything warm or pour anything expensive. Is that where someone sits can bless or ruin a season. The room may smell of goose and incense, but beneath it all is the scent of rivalry, ambition, and the sweat of someone quietly calculating their next cousin's downfall. The high priest sits at the center, naturally, flanked by scribes, officials, and whichever foreign dignitary has recently promised too much gold and delivered too little. You notice that the closer a person sits to him, the less they eat. They're too busy nodding or thinking, pretending. Not to count how many times they've been ignored, farther down the table. The mood changes, the lesser priests, cousins of landowners, and of someone who once fixed the Pharaoh's sandals. These guests laugh too loudly, drink too quickly, and tell stories that definitely didn't happen the way they're describing them. Someone is retelling the tale of the time my father wrestled a crocodile for papyrus access. It gets longer every time. You walk between them with a jug of wine and the awareness that you are invisible, but also listening. What you hear is a lot of polite treachery wrapped in laughter. One man compliments the priest's beard with such enthusiasm that it feels like an insult. Another subtly suggests that someone's son is very spirited, which usually means embarrassing and possibly dangerous. The seating itself is an art. No one sits directly across from someone they owe money to. Rivals are separated by neutral gossipers. People with secrets sit near pillars. People with power sit near witnesses. Then there's the slipping. Not of feet, though you've seen 2 sandals fall victim to spilled duck grease already, but of gifts. Tiny ones. A scroll. A ring. A folded piece of cloth passed under the table like a whisper with weight. One woman receives a palm leaf tucked into her sleeve, meaningless to you. But her reaction says it's either a declaration of affection or a tax threat. You serve lentils. The noble who receives them scowls, till the man across from him raises his eyebrows in a way that says, "Don't complain." Everyone's watching. The scowl disappears. Lentils become exquisite. Someone excuses themselves to the back, not to relieve themselves, but to quietly update someone else about what just got handed to whom. You see it all. The sideways glances, the fake laughs. The way someone's posture stiffens every time the high priest picks up his cup. There's food, yes, but no one eats too much. No one stains their robe. No one reaches. Everything is measured, not in portions, but in power. You refill a cup. The man doesn't thank you. But you notice his hand shake just slightly, and you think, this isn't dinner. It's a performance, a test, a battlefield with honey cakes. You serve, you watch, you remember. Because while they all try to climb invisible ladders, you're the one who sees who's stepping on whom, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They leave slowly, one by one, like ships pretending not to sink. The banquet ends not with a ceremony, but with a soft exhale. Plates half cleared, wine cups drained to various degrees of disappointment. Nobles murmuring goodbyes like they're casting small spells of self-importance. You stand near the door, pretending to polish a tray, watching it all dissolve. They leave their sandals behind. Not literally, they take the expensive ones. But they leave scuffs on the floor, little dusty ovals that mark where egos once rested. They leave napkins folded with guilt. Plates with bite marks that suggest more arguments than appetite. They leave things unsaid. You saw the glance between the priest and the merchant. You noticed the scroll that changed hands under the table and was never mentioned again. Again you heard someone say, "We'll speak later," in a tone that promised taxes, exile, or both. You walk back into the room after the last guest departs. It's quiet, but not peaceful. The quiet of a stage after a bad play, perfumed, sticky, a little, embarrassed by itself. The air still smells like food that's decided to linger. A faint, sweet staleness, duck bones, fruit skins, spilled wine that will never fully apologize. You begin the cleaning again, this time slower. You find a gold earring under a bench. It's probably expensive, probably cursed. You set it on a shelf. Someone will claim it. Or they won't. You find a note tucked beneath a plate. Half a sentence. If the temple roof leaks again, tell her. That's it. You wonder what the roof did? Or who she is. You fold the note. Place it near the offering basin. The gods. Might enjoy half-dash stories. You find a drawing. Scratched into the wax of a discarded tablet. Not hieroglyphs. Just a doodle. A goat. Wearing a crown. You nod. That feels accurate. The servants hum while they work. Someone mops around the duck. Grease like they're painting sorrow onto the floor. Someone else collects the leftovers, not for waste, but for redistribution. Feasting doesn't end, just migrates downward. The best honey cake goes to the priest's dog. You pause by the altar. The offering plate is still there. Smear of pomegranate. It's a ghost of a fig. The cat has returned and now guards it like a low-ranking deity on snack duty. You bow to her. Because, why not? You leave last. The lamps are low. The floor is wet. Music is gone. The gods, if they ever came, are asleep. But the room still remembers. Not the words, not the songs, not even the names. Just the weight of presence, the echo of sandals. The thud of someone trying to laugh louder than his debts. The way ambition smells after dessert. You pull the door closed behind you, slow and soft, like you're tucking the room in for the night. And as you walk away, you think, none of them will remember who poured their wine, but you remember who drank it all. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The hall is quiet now. Just the soft hiss of cooling lamps, the creak of reed mats settling back into stillness, the distant hush of the Nile turning in its sleep. You've walked through fields and temples, dug through mud and memory, stood behind banquets and beneath broken ceilings, and somehow you're still here, still breathing, still carrying the story. Thank you for staying until the end. If sleep found you halfway through, well, that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And now, as you lie there, the loop will wait once more for you.